I think Kyle Filipowski, Duke's freshman, who's not Derek, should be talked about more as a lottery type player. The short is that there just aren't a lot of guys, 6'10", 6'11" freshmen with his level of offensive versatility and skill and feel, as well as, passable enough movement skills and just crazy usage for a freshman. And his handle is probably the most impressive component of his game to me. It's not just his ball control and the way he maneuvers around the court. He's so comfortable handling in these like guard actions. Like we have our 6'10", 6'11" freshman running a pick and roll, holding off pressure, watch him bump away the defender, get into the paint and draw a foul with his size and his, post footwork. He is comfortable like making moves and going to the rim. And it's not just you see other players and other big men like with perimeter skills. Like I honestly think of like G.G. Jackson in this class who have some like flashy handle combos that aren't functional, but Flip has the perfect combo of some of that like impressive handling coordination. Look how he sets this move up. Look at that. The flexibility is okay. Like he's not the most mobile guy in the world, but he really does well going from slow to fast to get into the lane there. And when he has space, it's just really difficult to stop a guy who is 6'10", 6'11", can move like crazy, can handle the ball. Like it doesn't really matter if you put pressure on him, is that Flip is going to get to his spots. And it's difficult for non-guards especially to pressure his handle and take it away. He is really good keeping the ball in control, getting relatively low as well. As we said, he's not the most flexible guy in the world, but he can get below the shoulder of the defender. And just because of how large he is, like he doesn't have to create crazy advantages with his handle or quickness, because he can get to the front of the rim and score whenever he wants to. The finishing is a bit of an issue. He is pretty like he's not the most vertically athletic guy, and his arms aren't super long, and those definitely show up. But when you can do stuff like this, where he is using his movement skills and his strength, Flip is really, really strong. As he looks to have like a frame that can add quite a bit more weight, but he is really strong as is. This is an NBA style action DHO keeper play where Flip is able to, get a crease because of the DHO slip and maintain that advantage and finish with a huge poster because of that strength, which is just all so impressive. His handle isn't perfect. It gets, plucked at times, but combine that with his shooting, which is really, really phenomenal as well. The numbers aren't crazy. When you consider that, he's like a 6'10" freshman, they kind of are. And then you combine them with the shot versatility, which I have talked about plenty, how important that is on this channel. Kyle has, really high level volume for a guy of his height, as well as being someone who takes a ton of different kinds of threes and jumpers, like, coming off of this little lift action, one dribble into a movement-ish three, being able to hit step backs off the dribble. Again, not creating a ton of space, but with his size and touch, he can pretty comfortably shoot over most defenders, and is able to use that shooting threat to unlock his passing. He is a very quick decision maker, a very fine passer. Nothing elite or anything, but when this helps stunts, he is going to make the quick and right extra pass, most of the time, which is really great, and can make some higher level passes as well. This velocity and placement is just perfect. Flip immediately catching and processing the floor, noticing that even though this defender is near and this guy's way more open, a layup is better, and that he has enough space to rifle this one in just where his big man can catch and finish. It's really impressive, as well as having the wherewithal and the willingness to try plays like this. I've talked about quote-unquote good turnovers before, where turnovers aren't always bad from prospects when they're trying high leverage passes like this, which was just a tiny bit off there. Like that was very close, and if that was a little bit behind, that's probably a dunk, which is really, really good stuff. Flip has the ability now to take his scoring, his interior kind of handling ability and his shooting, And he just builds on that. His scoring package is really versatile. As we saw in that first play, one of the cool things that players like Flip can do is like dribble themselves into post position, where sometimes it is a lot more efficient to have your post scorer dribble himself from the perimeter into that post area instead of having to post him up and deal with help and stuff, where Flip can instead be the ball handler and draw help while getting to a spot for the post up. And as we've said before, there are some serious and definite finishing concerns where he just doesn't get that much lift, and he doesn't really exhibit a ton of craft on these, more just like throwing them up and using his size and his touch. But a lot of these I think are fixable, especially if he gets a lot stronger, because the footwork as a post scorer can be really impressive using his weight and drop stepping off of him. This is like my favorite. I fucking love drop steps. This is my favorite IRL post move. So beautifully playing on how forward this defender is leaning. Look how wide his base is, and that allows Flip to get his back foot below this defender, and that's a wide open layup every single time. It's beautiful stuff. And Flip is a really smart cutter as well. He sees this defender like spacing and cuts behind him. Like, these are like real perimeter kind of instincts that seem to exist without of the structure of this offense that this very comfortable perimeter player is exhibiting. He sees this defender asleep, ends up making a soft little cut, and because of his size, he's able to score easily. Flip was a very perimeter-oriented big in high school, and I definitely was a little worried about how his big man skills would translate, but as we've been seeing throughout this video, they are quite good, and he is a menace on the offensive glass as well. Just so relentless and aggressive, chasing down misses, including his own, over even bigger and stronger defenders at time. Like, he just dominated the offensive glass in this Kansas game. And he's just a really interesting case. When you look at prospects who are tall, shoot a lot of threes, and like have been drafted, like that's a pretty quick, easy filter. There's only a handful of prospects in the last 10 or so years that have shot more than 5 threes per 100 possession, and Flip is at almost 8. So if we go and sort by the most, there aren't many guys who have shot more threes per 100 than Flip has this year. Just the combination of like size and perimeter skill has led to a lot of interesting players. I think Lauri is a comp I've seen who's had a breakout year this year, but in college was definitely like a little different. Was more of a perimeter oriented scorer. His shooting was like incredibly elite, like percentages wise, which Flip's isn't at the moment. But Lauri had some similarities. He was not as much of a big, like he wasn't as good in the post, or he wasn't as good rebounding, but he had some of this same like perimeter fluidity and just mobility that was often overwhelming for opposing defenses, where he could attack closeouts with his long strides. You see Lauri, again, this is more of like a wingy kind of play, one dribble, long stride into a finish, rather than Flip, as we saw for a lot of these plays, was more was more working himself into the middle, getting these kind of post size advantages, whereas Lauri was more like that. I think Mo Wagner is a pretty intriguing like mid outcome, like low mid outcome, who's been pretty good this year for the Magic. Was a super skilled offensive player, more of a big than Flip. And that's where Flip's, I think, big advantage as a prospect comes, is he's just so much more comfortable on the perimeter. But Wagner had some real movement skills and some handling capacity. And once he got to the rim, he was probably a little more threatening than Flip is going to be. And he wasn't the shooter that Flip is, but he had some comfortability taking these kind of tougher threes. It was more spot ups for Mo than Flip takes. But there are similarities there, and I hate to invoke his the last great Duke big ball handler. Obviously, Flip is nowhere near the prospect that Paolo is, but there are similarities that we can look at. in terms of just these huge guys with great movement, with great skill and scoring versatility. Obviously, Paolo is like, more mid-range and shot-making oriented, and is just like a way better shooter and athlete and mover overall. But he's, been proof of how valuable guys who are that size and have real scoring skill and versatility. Again, Paolo is much better in basically every way, but there are parallels. And I think Flip, despite his issues with mobility and vertical athleticism at the rim, I think he's a smart defender who is passable enough as a mover, which leads me to believe that he can be okay for sure. But I think there's real offensive utility. I don't know if there's like real star upside, but as like a second, third scorer on a really good team, where he can play off of advantages created by other players, and just fill a ton of roles both on and off the ball. You can have Flip, work as a post player, work as an elbow DHO guy, work as a screener. You can have him play in the dunker spot. You can have him initiate pick and rolls if you want to, pick and pop. There's so much you can do with Flip. And I think that also leads itself to potential pathways for star development that we aren't seeing right now. He gets really good at pull-up or off-ball shooting, or he's really able to create for himself in the mid-range, and there's something more than we expected. So I think with these kind of players that just show us so much, especially with the passing and overall feel that Flip exhibits, at the moment I think he's a guy worth considering in the lottery. He's really, really good.